Here in this scenario I will show you how to configure a forest trust between two different forests. Here in this picture you can see two different forests. Each forest contains only one domain, and this is nscp.com and this domain is called techwebs.com, and both the domains contain one domain controller, and this domain controller is itself is the DNS server for this domain, and here is also the same. And here we are going to configure forest trust. Let's check what are the features of forest trust. And these are the main features of forest trust. The first one is transitivity. That means the trust between the forest routes. That means the forest route. This is the forest route for this forest nscp.com, and this is the forest route for the forest techwebs.com. And if I configure a forest trust between these two domains, and it will be transitive for all the domains, all the child domains, and all the additional trees of this forest. It will there is transitivity between them. And one way or two way means I can configure a one-way trust, or I can configure a two-way trust. In case of one-way trust is going this way. That means this domain is the trusting domain and this domain is the trusted domain, and this a user in trusted domain can access resources in the trusting domain. And if the trust is going two-way, users in this domain and users in this domain can access it. Let us check how to configure forest trust. Here I have a domain controller that is actually in the domain called, this is the domain controller of the domain called techwebs.com, and here is another domain controller that is in the forest, the domain in the forest nscp.com, and I am going to configure trust between these two domains, and I have to configure this trust inside these domain controllers. First of all, I am going to check the connectivity with the other domain controller, and there is a network connectivity, and here I am going to check the IP configuration. This means the DNS server means this domain controller itself is the DNS server for this domain, and in case of other domain controller, and this domain controller itself is the DNS server for this domain. And here I am going to the DNS configuration of the domain nscp.com, and right click the server, and I have to configure a forwarder, and this DNS server, this queries should be forwarded to the DNS server of the other domain called techwebs.com. And type the IP address of the DNS server of techwebs.com. That's all for, and do the same thing here in techwebs.com. Point to the domain DNS server of the domain called nscp.com here as a forwarder. This means all the queries to nscp.com will be forwarded to this DNS server. We have to make sure that the DNS forwarder is working properly. For that, here we can use NSLookup tool. Sorry, this is nscp.com, so I am typing the other domain's DNS name, and it will show the IP address, the DNS IP address, I mean the IP address of the DNS server. And for instance, if I type a computer name srv2.techwebs.com, it will show the IP address of that computer. In this scenario, this same computer is a domain controller, DNS server, and all that things belonging to that domain. This is how we can check the working of the forwarder, and do the same thing in other domain controller before you are going to configure a forest trust. And there is a very important point we have to notice before configuring forest trust: our domain function level and forest function level. Our domain function level should be in the highest order, and the forest function level should also be in the highest order. So let us raise the functional level